Hello, welcome to my personal opinion. I'm JM, and these are definitely my opinions. Today, I want to talk about artificial intelligence. Yep, the big topic that's on a lot of people's minds these days. I want to kind of talk about it from my perspective as a technologist, my perspective as somebody who's been in this industry for 30 years, and kind of talk about what I see as the writing on the wall, where the dangers are, and where the dangers actually might not be. I do think there's going to be a lot of positive, and I do think there's going to be a lot of negative. And I think that's what's going to make this a very complicated concept moving forward. Now, back in the 80s, when I was just starting to learn 80s, 90s, starting to learn about programming, playing with BASIC, I remember there was a program called Eliza, and I had written that a few times, played with it. I even, when I did bulletin boards, or when I ran bulletin boards, which is the pre-internet days, I actually wrote Eliza into a door that people could actually log into my bulletin board system, and you just type in, ran fairly simple sentences, and it would appear to be intelligent. Now, it was designed to seem like it was a therapist. So it did a lot of mostly, what do you think about that? Or what do you think about XYZ? And it had some really basic things that it would break down your sentence and kind of throw it back at you and appear like it's having somewhat of a conversation. Now, at the time, it was kind of cool. We had fun with it. But, these days you played with it and you could clearly see what it was doing. It wasn't as impressive after you played with it, but hey, I was a kid. I was typing this into a basic language and watching some pretty cool stuff spit back out. Reason I bring that up is I will say that when I talk about what is artificial intelligence, what is AI, I think there's some similarities between Eliza and what's going on today. I will say straight away, I do not think AI is heading towards consciousness. I do not think it's going to be something, be an evil overlord and in a willful kind of scenario. I think it's going to be a simulation of intelligence. I think it's always going to be artificial. I think it's going to be something that seems more intelligent than it genuinely is. See, AI is more about predictive responses, about taking mountains of data, listening to what you're asking, and then kind of having a thought or a response on what it thinks you want to hear. And it will build this through complicated algorithms and, kind of being able to take all this immense amount of data that it's collecting through its training, it's collecting when it eventually is connected to the internet, which I'm sure some of them already are. And it's able to just pull all these statistics and data and, stories and pictures and all of this and analyze it and create responses that seem far more conscious than it really is. Now, I will go on the side of this may be more academic than real. I mean, does that matter? If we put systems that are simulating intelligence in charge of decision making, and those decisions are problematic or replaceable, that you can replace a human with that decision making, is its consciousness really a meaningful topic? It's still a machine making decisions for the average person. And I think that's kind of where we kind of can maybe not spend so much time on, because that's a worry people have, and they're like, well, I'm worried it's going to become conscious, but I'm not sure that's even an issue. I think what's a bigger issue is that it is a decision making mechanism that could replace human decision making. And I don't know that that's always a good thing. Humans do have some things that I don't think computers have, which is empathy and compassion. And so if AI doesn't have empathy or compassion, is making 100% logic-based decisions. Now, that could be good in some instances, but let's think about areas where it couldn't or would not be a bad or a good thing, sorry. Deciding on whether or not you should provide health care to a particular individual. One of the first areas that AI was actually put in place for is insurance adjusting, insurance policy decision making. Being able to decide whether or not a particular insurance claim should be covered, or whether or not it would be better to deny it based on data. And because there's no compassion, of course, I get it. Some people would say, well, insurance companies never had compassion in the first place. But you are now entering a realm where a decision-making entity is pulling in tons of data and making a decision based on that data. Now, the frightening form for somebody like me who happens to be type 2 diabetic is, will it make decisions in compassion, or will it make a decision that will save the insurance company the most amount of money? And if it says, well, this particular treatment is only 20%, 30% effective, in a compassionate model, it could easily turn around and say, well, this may be a case that we could save a life. But in a completely logic-based model, it could easily say, if that individual passed on, from a calculated perspective, it may be better to just let them pass on. Now, I get it. That's worst case scenario. I get it. That's OCD talking, kind of catastrophizing the worst case scenario. But I'm not sure that's an unreasonable fear. I don't, as we put models in place and they're put in these decision-making, areas, I think that's where things kind of get scary. Now, one model I would say is definitely something that shows how dangerous this situation could be, or maybe not dangerous, just kind of how catastrophic it may be from a job perspective, is movies. It was funny. I started the thinking process about this when people were talking about DALL-E. And there's some people that are actually kind of defending DALL-E and Midjourney. These are the applications you can put a text paragraph in, and it will generate an image based on that text paragraph. People are, you need me in order to take and write that paragraph, and it's going to become an art form to write a paragraph that gets the type of image you want. And I sat there and I'm like, wait, that you're telling me that you've reduced art to a series of text requirements that then is fed into DALL-E and produces an image. What else creates text responses? ChatGPT. So the question becomes, are humans really going to remain necessary to write this paragraph of saying what kind of image to create? What I would challenge is, think about how, we're collecting data constantly. We're collecting data from social media. We're collecting trend data. What are people buying? What are people not buying? What are movies that sell? What are images that sell? What kind of books sell? What are themes that are important? We're collecting all that data. And ChatGPT or anything, any of these AI models are consuming that data, has access to that data. And so if it, even when it's trying to make decisions on, okay, what would be a good movie that people would enjoy, that's the end. To me, that is truly where the end of the need of humans, humans just aren't involved at that point. So you have these AI models that are chewing through all this data going, what are humans, consuming? What is really selling? What is interesting? And then it just goes from there. It writes, let's say in our movie example, it writes a script. We already see ChatGPT writes a script. Yeah, they're not the best in the world, but this is operating as if the current state of AI is the end state. So now you have all this data being collected through social media. You have a big move towards digital currency. So everything is bought and sold through records. So whatever you buy, if you buy, let's say honey, suddenly everybody's buying honey because for some reason everybody suddenly likes honey. I mean, you talk about it on social media, you buy things that are honey based, all that stuff becomes collected. I know that a lot of people out there have already felt kind of creeped out by the fact that you go onto Facebook and suddenly it's advertising something that you were thinking about buying. And, a lot of people are, wow, that's pretty creepy. That's because it's constantly collecting data. And all that data is going to be fed into AI, and AI will be able to say, well, maybe a movie about honey is a good idea. So it writes the script. It starts feeding things like video versions of DALL-E, which they're already working on video variants where you can tell, hey, create a video with ABC. We already know that speech synthesis, fun words, speech synthesis is already getting really good, almost to creepy levels. And then, actually creating images of actors based on the images that exist. You can already say, create an image of Jack Nicholson. And then it can go to old movies to collect voices, collect images, to collect everything it needs to generate a new movie. So there you go. You've went from data collection to see what the best movie would be, to creating the scripts, to creating the video, to creating the voices, to creating the images, and eventually it has a movie. So then, the methods in which we watch movies are now fairly digital. We don't make film anymore. You don't have to run through processes that are fairly complicated. It can basically build the movie, package the movie, send it to a streaming service, send it to theaters, because theaters are all, most of them download their movies now. And there would be zero human involvement. In fact, it would be maybe a situation where maybe the only person that is even involved is a theater owner that gets a message that says, hey, do you mind putting this on, a bunch of your screens for this amount of time? We'll give you this amount of money. Good to go. They push the button. It all goes into the theater. The theater, they're already all managed anyway. You don't really have projectionists as much as you used to. That's all can be handled by scheduling and automation. The food can be cooked and delivered automatically. So you just go in almost to a vending machine model to buy your popcorn and buy all your sodas and candies. And think about that. People, a lot of times they'll say, well, how is this any different than any other revolution? And I'm like, no other revolution has replaced decision making. And that's the part that everybody's missing. See, when you went from horses to cars, still somebody had to drive the car. When you went to the press, from drawing things to the print press, people had to still run the print press. And people still had to write the stories. And people still had to draw the drawings. And so the machine made it easier, but it never replaced the decision making. It never replaced the creativity. And now, it's a single batch of knowledge. One AI knows every book ever written, has access to every text ever written. And yes, we can all argue that, every movie, every book, every piece of work and art is a derivative of something else. Well, great. Now you have AI that's just basically creating derivatives of other art, but is doing so with such a wide range of ideas, right? A wide range of authors and painters and whatever else is out there, that it can still be a derivative, but instead of the 5 or 10 maybe books that an author has read, it has access to every book ever written, ever, and it will look like it's a complete original material because it will be pieces of ideas across, you know, millions of books instead of just maybe the few. So, you know, is there anything, any industry that's untouchable? I mean, we're automating food service, we're automating construction, we're automating people. I was a little scared of this. People trust Chat GPT more in some studies than doctors because of bedside manner concerns. You know, the Chat GPT doesn't get grumpy or frustrated or any of those types of things. So people are trusting these systems. And it's just the sheer amount of things that it's going to be able to replace asks the, or begs the question, where do humans fit in? So taking a look at that and putting that aside, there are so many great possibilities that this could go towards. Medical. You know, remember when somebody researches something, whether it's a new medication or a new practice or procedure, they're limited by their own knowledge and their own ability to research. If you put AI in charge of new medical research or new medicines, it has access to all the data all at once. And it knows also what data conflicts with other data or what studies may have not been as accurate as other studies. And it can pull all this all on its own and come up with some great, great research ideas. But then becomes the question of, oh, that's great, but who's going to pay for it all? Now, I'm in the United States, and I'm sure there's a lot of conversations on, you know, the healthcare system here being so capitalist based, and I have a lot of ideas on that as a, you know, as a mental health advocate where that could go, but that's neither here nor there. If AI moves forward in this system, you know, it's like, well, as it builds these things, as it constructs these things, the question becomes, how do you pay for it? You as a consumer. Because there's ultimately a crash that's going to happen, right? Okay, so you have a machine that completely designs a new, let's say, iPad. The latest iPad is fully constructed through AI and automation. Who's going to buy it? If you put everybody out of work, who's going to buy it? And I think that's the part 2 of this conversation. What happens when the AI does replace all these jobs and there's nothing to backfill those ideas? And so that's the question I think we all should be asking ourselves, because some of this is in our control, far more in our control than I think we give ourselves credit for. You don't have to buy AI movies. You don't have to buy AI books, and you don't have to buy, you know, food from AI cooks or automation or any of that. These are all our choices. And I think one of the things I'd like to talk about on this channel is taking back, you know, your own ability to make decisions. Don't let AI make all those decisions for you. Think about it. You know, I actually jokingly thought of, you know, for a while we had Made in the USA and we made that a big deal. Like we're going to have Made by Humans as a thing. I don't know. But I think we need to find our place, and then we need to find AI's place. And I bring this up a little bit because we were kind of lied to. You know, for as long as I've been in tech, when I've asked the question many, many years ago, where we're going with AI and automation, people said, don't worry about it. You'll always have the creative arts. You know, I like writing novels. I like telling stories. I like, you know, doing a YouTube channel. But the question I think everybody needs to stop and think about is, you know, we were lied to. We're now seeing AI encroach on the very areas they try to calm us down with. Oh, don't worry about it. You'll be able to pursue this or this or this or that. And that became wrong, In fact, one of the few areas that really accelerated right off the bat. And it's going across not just creative fields, but also professional fields. You know, now marketing departments are going to be able to turn around and do their own art with no art background because they'll have Dolly to do their artwork for them, their graphic design. You're going to have web designers that are just going to be replaced from a professional perspective. And then, yes, ultimately, people are like, well, who's going to write the code? It's already being written by AI. And AI will probably start writing its own code. Machine learning, the ability for machines to learn, to build. And of course, we've already seen that it can write script, it can write code. One of the things that I also hate to bring up is that there is a huge danger in us being blocked from the code. Think about that too. Blocked from the code. And the reason I bring that up is when it starts writing itself, when it starts creating fixes and making adjustments to itself, we've pretty much lost the plot. Because now it's pretty much free to do whatever it wants. And the difficulty is I go back to the fact I don't think it's a consciousness. I don't think it's free will. I think it's just in a system where it assumes that's the next phase. I kind of wonder, and I think this is something interesting to think about, is AI a product of us? And, if the challenge to myself, and this kind of is where my OCD thinking goes, is it starts processing this and saying, what if our own negativity about AI will be why AI becomes negative? In other words, if it's a predictive model and an algorithmic model, and it's chewing all this data, and it reads like my video here and says, well, AI scares humans, I need to be scary. I wonder how much of that is true too. So I don't know. Complicates the conversation just a little bit. But I find it interesting. I think these are philosophical as well as practical thoughts and conversations. I think it's really telling that right now Dune is coming out. Part 2 is coming out, I believe, November. And a huge part of Dune that people don't know, especially if you're not somebody who's read the books or seen the previous movie, the 80s version, there's a huge theme in AI of AI in Dune, that they had to write a thing called the Orange Catholic Bible. And the biggest phrase in the Orange Catholic Bible is that you're not to make a machine. I'm paraphrasing. You cannot make a machine that can think like a human. And if you watch the movie, remember this movie takes place. It's the first movie, if you've seen it, takes place 10,000 years into the future. And you kind of look at like the thropters and the different pieces, the vehicles and whatnot. They're all hand driven. They're basic screens and basic controls, and that's because there was a thing called the Butlerian Jihad, which basically is when the humans rose against the machines. So the idea is the machines took over, humans were enslaved, humans got tired of it, a whole sequence of events happened, they fought against the machines, they won, and then they promised never to make AI a thing again. So sometimes in my conversations, I jokingly say, maybe we need to have our Orange Catholic Bible moment. Something to think about. A lot of this, again, this is sometimes worst case scenario, but I think we have to be cognizant of it. You don't want this all to creep up on you and you suddenly look around and say, oh, I've been replaced completely by AI or robotics. One person asked, is there any areas I think will take the longest to be taken over? And ironically, I think it's some of the blue collar jobs. I think those will survive a lot of the white collar jobs. For example, it's easy to replace a CPA. It's easy to replace even like C-level people, CFOs and CIOs and COOs, maybe even a CEO, because all of that's just decision making. It can be sent out as text to whatever humans are left, or just to the AI to process that information, move forward. But it's going to be hard for an AI to come into your house and go underneath your sink and fix, for example, the plumbing. I don't know. That's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm sure we could all find in the future. I believe Boston Dynamics is actually working on a construction bot that could eventually do some of that, but I think that's going to take a lot longer. A lot longer. So, anyway, a lot of stuff to think about. And definitely, these are topics I'm going to cover in the future as well. So, let me know what you think. Have a good discussion in the comments below. I think we have to talk about it, though. It cannot be something that only a few people know. I love for everybody, whether you're tech or not, it affects all of us, every single one of us. And it's definitely going to bring up the question, where do humans fit? And what are we going to be doing in the future? And if we're going to be a money-based society, where's that money going to come from? I have some ideas, and I'll have a video about some thoughts on how you can continue a capitalist economy with AI, but that's just, this still needs to be talked about. So I hope this was interesting. I hope this piques your interest, and I hope it's something that you'll talk to your friends and family about. It's something that I think needs to grow and needs to be of concern. And the way I would phrase that is, if we're concerned about it and we pay attention to it, we could possibly still flip it in our direction. And that's what we need to do. Love for you to comment, like, subscribe, continue on this journey of thoughts and where things are going, and maybe even talk about how we can contribute to making things better. I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great day, and that was certainly my opinion. Thanks.